Typography is the heart of every great design, and in Adobe InDesign, it becomes your most powerful tool to communicate, captivate, and inspire. Working with type is one of the most important things you will need to know when working in InDesign. Type is a crucial element in any design, and InDesign offers the most powerful tools to help you manage and style it effectively. InDesign is all about harnessing type and managing type to make your text look amazing, whether it's for a magazine, a brochure, or a small business card. So in this video, we are going to look at all the ways in which InDesign can help you create and format type. And there is a lot of things to know. So get comfortable and let's jump into InDesign and check it out. So type in InDesign, this is going to be a big one. So here I have a few document examples showcasing some of the wonderful ways you can format type. Here is an example of a booklet where the type can be creative with flair with font pairings. And here is an example of a text-heavy document where the type needs to be more practical and systematic. So two different approaches there. When working in InDesign, you can get really creative with your type, or if you're working on larger documents like reports, you can get into the nitty-gritty and format and manage large chunks of information. At this point in the course, it will help to be aware of all the wonderful ways you can use type for any design approach. So let's get hands-on with type and look at how we can manage and format it. To do this, let's jump into a worksheet. This document can be found in the downloadable folder that comes with this course. This download folder comes with multiple projects and a ton of assets and resources we will be using in this course. You can find the link to acquire the folder from the description. With the download folder open, click into folder 2 practice files and open the practice worksheets InDesign file. And if we scroll down to page 2, we can see a variety of worksheets. For this video, we are going to look at the type worksheet. So with the selection tool, I'll select the working with type thumbnail. Now I'll either come to the links panel and click edit original, or hold Alt on the keyboard and double click on the worksheet thumbnail and the worksheet will open up in its own document. In this practice session, you learn all the crucial ways you can format type in InDesign, giving you the insight and skills to build professional and visually appealing compositions. Here in this worksheet, you can see what we are going to cover. We are going to start simple for those of you who may be new to InDesign, and then we are going to go all the way up to some of the more advanced type features. So let's scroll down to the second spread, and here we can see a number of type features. So at a glance here, you can see a lot of formats that can be applied to type. And these are the following things we are going to look at in this video. So let's scroll onto the next spread and have a go and see all the ways we can work with type in InDesign. Now, if you have the worksheet open, if you press W on the keyboard, you can toggle between normal and preview mode. For this session, I'd recommend you proceed in preview mode. This will just ensure that we don't see all the guides in the background so we can focus on the type. So when working with type in InDesign, there are two key panels you want to pay close attention to: the character panel and the control panel. If you cannot see these panels, you can come up to Window and click on Control, or into Type and select Character. I like to keep my control panel at the top of my screen and my character panel in the bottom right. So to begin, we are going to start off with a simple text frame. So to create a text frame, you can do one of two things. You can come over to the Tools panel and select one of the frames or shape tools. In this instance, I'll select the rectangle tool and I'll click to draw out a frame. Now with a frame in your work area, you can simply click the type tool, then click on the empty frame, and that will then become a type frame with the type prompt ready to enter in your type. So I'll press Escape to deselect the text frame and delete that. Another way is to simply select the type tool, then come and drag to create a frame, and upon release, it will become a type frame with the type prompt ready to enter in your text. So here I'll just place in type here. Now by default, it will set my type to Minion Pro at size 12 points. Keep in mind, this is just my settings. You may have something different here. So once we have added type into the frame, we can select it. Now, when working with type in InDesign, you can keep an eye on two panels, the control panel and the character panel. Now they both do the same. However, your control panel can be set to the top, where you can see other formatting features. So first I'll click on the top drop down to browse the fonts I have installed, or I'll just type in Arial into the box to show the list of fonts available, and I'll select Arial Regular. Now, if I come to the character panel, we can see the font is now changed here as well, and we have other options to format the type. So with the type selected, this time in the character panel, we can change the font size by either clicking the up and down buttons or by typing in a value. So I'll just type in 50. Keep in mind, this can also be done up in the control panel. Now, once you have some type selected, if you want to deselect, you can simply press escape on the keyboard and you will shift to the selection tool. Now, if we press W on the keyboard, we can toggle between normal and preview mode and we can see the frame outline we just created. Okay, so that is as simple as it gets when creating some type. Let's now look at some types of formatting. So once you have a type frame, it can be really easy to duplicate. With the selection tool, I'll click on the type frame to select it, press and hold Alt and simply click and drag below, and upon release, we will duplicate the frame. So once you have a type frame, you can edit the type in two ways. You can click on the frame with the selection tool and then double click into the frame to select the type. I'll press escape to deselect, or without a frame selected, you can press T on the keyboard for the type tool and simply click into the frame once and click and drag to select your type. So looking in the control panel, next to the font name, there are a bunch of options we have here. If we click the first one, we can simply set the type to all caps. Here we can underline the type and we can put a stroke through the type. And I'll press Command Z on Mac or Control Z on PC to undo that. Now, if I just type in 19th of May, I'll select the type and click to toggle off all caps. I'll select the TH and we can apply a superscript. If I type in CO2, we can select the 2 and add a subscript. Now I'll just go back and enter in type here. With it all selected, there is another option you have here called small caps. So I'll click back on the small caps button to go back to my plain type. With it selected, back up in the control panel, we can click the drop down below for font name, and this will display any additional fonts in the family. Keep in mind, we can also do this in the character panel. So in the character panel, I'll click the drop down below the font name, and in this case, I'll click on bold. Now, a really useful feature in InDesign to keep in mind is change case. If you accidentally type into InDesign in all caps, or someone gives you some text that happens to be in all caps, or even title case, changing it to sentence case can be really easy. So next, I'll press caps lock and type in type here. With the type selected, come up to type, scroll down to change case, and from here you can select what you want. In this instance, I'll hit sentence case and boom. Really good for saving you some time. So with the type selected, changing the color is as easy as coming down to the bottom of the tools panel, making sure the fill color is selected, then picking a color from the swatches panel, or double clicking on the fill color and select a color from the RGB color space view. I'll press escape to deselect, I'll press T and click into to select the type. And this time I can apply a gradient from a swatch I made earlier. With it selected, we can click on the gradient tool, then click and drag over the type to choose the direction the gradient goes in. Easy. With the type selected, I can click on the fill color and just come back and add a solid black. Another formatting option you have is called Skew. Now, this is a strange one, but nonetheless one we should cover. I'll select the type, come up and hit the all caps button, and over to the right we can see an icon slightly tilted. This is called Skew, false italic. By toggling this up, I'll go for a value of 10. We can add a slant to the type to apply a false italic effect. With the type selected, I'll click in the Skew value and set this back to 0. Next to Skew, we have one for horizontal scale. By toggling this, you can add artificial width to your type. I'll push mine up to 110%. On this occasion, I might have to press escape and use the selection tool to just pull out the width of my text frame to fit the text inside. I'll set this back to 100. And likewise with vertical scale, by toggling this, you can add artificial height to your text. I'll push mine up to 120%, then click into the value and set this back to 100%, and press escape to deselect the type. Now, when working in InDesign with type, you will often find that your frames can be all shapes and sizes. And when you have a few on your page, it can start to get crowded. Now, there is a really useful tip to keep in mind to keep you on top of your frames. So with the selection tool, I'll click the bottom right anchor point of my type frame and just drag it down and across like so. Right now, I have a large type frame with just a small amount of text inside. Now you can either click and drag the handle in, or simply double click on the bottom right anchor point of the frame and the frame will collapse to fit the content inside. So should you find yourself wanting to quickly reduce the frame to fit your type, remember, double click the bottom right anchor point. So right now I have some type in my frame here with a particular format applied. Another cool feature to save you time is the ability to clone the formatting from one piece of type to another. So let's just say with the type tool, I quickly make another type frame below, And in this, I'll just place in test type. And as I type this in, we can see that it has the default font applied again. Now you may find yourself in instances like this where you have type frames with some text inside, and you might want to quickly apply a particular format to the type that exists in another frame. So a quick way to do this is if we double click into the frame and select all the type, if we then come over to the tools menu, we can click the eyedropper tool. With this selected, if we carefully come over to some text that we want to copy the format, if we click on the type with the eyedropper, the format will be copied and applied to our new type. Easy. A useful trick to keep in mind to save you some time there. So that's a bunch of quick formatting you can apply to your type. Now when you have type in a frame, you can then look to align it in the frame. I'll make sure to click to enter into my type frame and place the cursor at the start. When you have the cursor at the ready, you can come up to the control panel and click a series of alignment tools. First, we will look at the horizontal align tools. Here I can click the align center. I can click to align to the right or back again to the left. So I'll click to align to the center and I'll press escape to deselect. Now with the selection tool, if we simply select the frame, back up to the control panel, we can see some further align tools. This time, we will look at the vertical align tools. Here we can click to align center in the frame vertically, and we can click to align to the bottom of the frame. So top, middle, and bottom. For now, I'll click the align center of the frame. With the text frame selected, press and hold Alt and simply click and drag below to duplicate. I'll press T and click into the frame and select the type. I'll come up to hit all caps. I'll change the font to bold and set the size to 25 points. So if you want to add space between all your letters, we can tweak the tracking. With the type selected, we can either come into the control panel or come into the character panel and either click up or down on the tracking tool, or I'll come into the value box and type in 200 and press enter. Another quick tip is to use the keyboard shortcut. With the type selected, if we press and hold Alt on the keyboard, we can press left and right, and this will toggle the tracking in and out. So I'll press and hold Alt and press left until my tracking is set back to 0. Now if we want to edit the space between individual letters, then here we will want to change the kerning. This time, click precisely where you want to edit the kerning. In this case, I'll click and place the cursor after the letter T. Then up into the control panel or into the character panel, we can either click up and down on the kerning tool, or I'll come into the measure box and type in 200 and press enter. Another quick tip is to use the keyboard shortcut. With the cursor in the right place, if we press and hold Alt on the keyboard, we can press left and right, and this will toggle the kerning in and out. So I'll press and hold Alt and press left until my kerning is back to 0, and I'll press escape to deselect the text. With the selection tool, I'll click on the type frame to select it, press and hold Alt and simply click and drag below to duplicate. I'll press T and click into the frame and select all the type. I'll press Command C on Mac or Control C on PC to copy. I'll press right to set my cursor at the end and press enter to add a hard return. And I'll press Command V on Mac or Control V on PC to paste. I'll select the bottom row of text, change the font to regular and type in for leading. So I'll press Command A on Mac or Control A on PC to select all. And with all the types selected, I can come up into the control panel or into the character panel, and this time either click up and down on the leading tool, or I'll come into the value box and type in 40 and press enter. Another quick tip is to use the keyboard shortcut. With the type selected, we can press and hold Alt on the keyboard, where we can press up and down, and this will toggle the leading. So I'll press and hold Alt and press up and down until my leading is set to 34. I'll press escape to deselect. With the selection tool, I'll click on the type frame above, press and hold Alt and simply click and drag below to duplicate. I'll press T and click into the frame and select the type. And now I'll type in H2O. I'll select the type and change the font to size 40. I'll click to select the number 2. Then I'll come up into the control panel and this time click down on the baseline tool until the value is set to -10. So this is a little like the subscript we did earlier, but this gives you much more control. Here you can change how much the baseline shift is applied, and you can also change the font size of the character as well. When applying subscript, this will transform the type into a very small type format, which we cannot change. However, here you can toggle the font size to whatever we like. So those are a lot of formatting options you can apply to type in InDesign. All of the standard stuff you really want to be aware of. So now let's look at some of the more dynamic features in InDesign. First, we'll start by looking at some diagonal type. Now, it's not very common for one to do diagonal type in InDesign, but in the unique instance where you'd like to try and use it, there is an easy way to do it in InDesign. First, we need to create a type frame. So I'll come over to the type frame with the type aligned center in the frame. And with the selection tool, I'll click the frame and press and hold Alt and drag across to quickly make a duplicate. Now with my text frame in place, if we come over to the tools menu and click and hold on the scale tool, we will see a tool called share. The share tool allows you to slant or skew an object such as text, images, or shapes along a specific axis. This tool can be used to create a distorted or angled effect, giving your design a dynamic three-dimensional look. This tool will allow you to manipulate the type frame to add an angle to it. Now when using this tool, you will also need to pay close attention to the reference point on the far left of the control panel. Here you can see some squares, and this basically represents the reference point of the frame. In this instance, I'm going to click the middle, and with the share tool selected, I'll come over to my type frame, press and hold Shift, and on the right side, I'll just click and drag up like so. As I do this, we will add a new diagonal dimension to the frame. And as you can see, the type is now at a slight angle inside the type frame. Now, one of the cool things about this is if we put our mouse on the left or right middle anchor point, we can click and drag, and we can see that the type frame will extend at the same angle. Nice. So another cool feature is type along a path. To do this is pretty easy. So first we need to have a path in order to apply our text to. So I'll come over to the tools menu and quickly grab the pen tool. I'll come over into my worksheet and click once on the first point, then click on the next point, once again on the other, and then finally on the last one just to quickly draw a line. Into the tools menu, I'll make sure the stroke is selected and I'll set this to black. Back over to my pen tool, I'll click and hold and grab the convert direction point tool. Then I'll just click and drag on my points like so to add some curves to the line while holding Shift. So once you have a path in InDesign, applying type to it is pretty straightforward. Back over to the tools menu, this time I'll click and hold on the type tool and select the type on a path tool. With the tool selected, if we come back over to the path and move the mouse cursor over the stroke until I see a plus icon, then upon click we will now see the tool prompt at the start of the path ready to type. So I'll add in type along a path, double click to select the type and start applying some type formatting. Now if we press escape to deselect the type, with the selection tool, if we click back on our stroke, we will see some small details here which will allow us to tweak the type on the stroke. First off, on the far left, we can see a large line. If we carefully put our mouse cursor over this, we will see a little icon under the mouse cursor change, and we can see this little arrow where we can click and drag, and this will alter where the type begins on the line. Another detail to look out for is if we look around halfway along the stroke, we will see this little blue line. If we put our mouse cursor over this, again we will see another small icon where we can click and drag this down, which will set the type above or below the stroke. Now there are even more options we can consider when applying type to a stroke. If we come up to type and scroll down to type on a path, we can come across and click on options. Upon click, a menu will appear, and we can see here there's quite a few options we can consider. The first one is effect. If we click on the drop down, we can see there are a number of options we can apply. If I scroll through these from rainbow down to gravity, we can see the effect that these are having on the type. The next option is actually quite an important one, which is the align option. If we click the drop down, we can toggle how the type is aligned to the stroke, which can be quite helpful here. We can go from ascender to baseline, and as I click through these, we can see the effect that is having. And I'll just click cancel. And lastly, with the type along a curve selected, if we come over to the tools menu and make sure the stroke color is selected, we can simply set this to transparent, and now the type is sitting on a curve without the line below. Easy. Now another cool feature is type along a vertical path. Now this can be done similar to type along a curved stroke. First we'll need a stroke in order to apply the type. So I'll come over to the tools menu, click the stroke tool, and I'll click on my first point and click and drag down to the second point and set my stroke to a size of 0.5. I'll come back to the tools menu, click type along a path and click once, and I'll place in type here. Right now you can see the default setting applied to the type. I'll set the font to Arial regular, click the all caps button, come up to type, down to type on a path and click on type options. When the menu appears, for the effect we can choose stair step. For the align setting we can choose center, and for the to path setting, set this to top and click OK. Now we will see the type is aligned vertically down the center of the stroke. Now if we want to fill this along the stroke, we can come up to the control panel and hit the justify all line type button and increase the tracking. If we come over to the tools menu and make sure the stroke color is selected, we can simply set this to transparent, and now the type is sitting on a vertical stroke path without a line below. So next comes type along a circle path. Again, this can be done similar to type along a curve stroke, though first we'll need a circle stroke in order to apply the type. So I'll come over to the tools menu, click on the circle shape tool, I'll click on the first point, click and drag down to the bottom right point, release to draw my circle and set the stroke size to 0.5. Back into the tools menu, again I'll select the type on a path tool, come over to the circle. Now as you place your mouse cursor over the stroke, you will see a plus icon under the mouse pointer. Now wherever you click on the circle is where you will start the text prompt. So I'll carefully click right at the top of the circle and add in type around a circle. I'll set the font to 30, set the font to Arial Regular, and set the tracking to 300. Now if we press escape to deselect the type, with the selection tool, if we click back on our circle, we will see some small details here, which will allow us to tweak the type on the stroke, just like we saw earlier. Again, we can see a large line at the start of the type, but also at the end. If we carefully put our mouse cursor over these, we will see a little icon under the mouse cursor change, and we can see this little arrow pointing either left or right, which we can click and drag, and this will alter where the type begins and ends on the circle stroke. Another little detail to look out for is the line on the stroke that you can click and drag to change the alignment of the type along the stroke. If we look around halfway along the stroke, we can see this little blue line. Again, if we come up to type, scroll down to path on a type, we can come across and click on some options, and again toggle the properties here. So those are the key type along a path options you can use in InDesign. Now another really cool feature in InDesign that you don't see very often is responsive type frames. Now as a seasoned user of InDesign, frames can sometimes be clumsy and can be a pain to keep on top of to maintain a neat workflow. One feature InDesign has that can help is responsive type frames. Let's take a quick look at how this works. So back up to the previous spread, I have some examples here. Now if I click into this frame, select all and start to type some text, you will see that the frame extends with the type. If I remove the type, it also contracts. This can be great to create type frames with applied styles like strokes, colors, and margins, and if you add and change the type, it will respond. This can be massively helpful and save you a huge amount of time and help with your styling. So let's look at how we can set up a responsive type frame. First, I'll come over to the tools menu and we can do one of two things. We can either click on the type tool or the frame tool. I'll just come and grab a frame tool and come into the canvas and just click and drag to draw a frame. I'll press T to activate the type tool, then click once into the frame, then I'll carefully add type inside a frame. For the sake of this tutorial, I'll select all the text, change the font to Arial Bold, change the font size to 15 points, and press escape to deselect the type. Once you have a frame with some type, we can tweak the settings to create the responsive feature. To do this is easy. With the selection tool and the type frame selected, simply right click on the frame and come to text frame options. Upon click, the text frame option menu will appear. In here, there will be a number of options we can customize. On the left, we will see options general through to footnotes. The first option, general, will allow us to change a number of settings. The first setting we will want to focus on is the inset spacing. This will add a small margin inside the frame. So to begin, I'll come down and click on the preview icon in the bottom left. Then I'll set the top to 3 mm, press tab, and move to the next value. Now due to the link icon being applied, this will apply 3 mm to all the values. And now in the type frame, we can see an inset space applied. Okay, so now the responsive part. Next, we're going to click on the auto size option on the left. Then we can click on the drop down for auto sizing and choose a number of options. For this, we are going to click height and width. Now upon clicking this, you may notice that the text inside the frame collapses. What we need to do here is come and click the minimum height and no line breaks constraint options. Here we'll keep the minimum height set to 0, and with the no line breaks ticked, we will now see that the frame in the dock is now filled nicely. And if we click OK and double click into the type frame, we can now change the text and we will see that this will be responsive. Now it's just a case of applying some styles to this frame. I'll press escape to deselect the type. With the selection tool, I'll click the frame, come over to the stroke options and set the stroke and fill color, and that will apply some simple effects to the frame. With the frame selected, if I press and hold Alt and click and drag down, I can quickly duplicate the text frame, apply some new effects, and now we've got 2 type frames on top that are responsive. However, notice on this occasion, the text is aligned center. So with the selection tool, I'll click both frames, right click and click on text frame options. Back on auto size, this time pay close attention to the squares. Here I'll click on the middle left point, click OK, align my frames to the left, and now as I add more text, the frames will be aligned to the left. Nice. So the last technique we are going to look at is setting type to outlines. To set type to outlines is pretty simple. First, you will need to have a frame with some type inside, and for the sake of this tutorial, I have prepared this frame earlier. With the selection tool, if we click on a type frame with type inside, we can come up to type and click on make outlines. Upon click, we will convert the type into frames. If we press A to activate the direct selection tool and place our mouse cursor over the area, we will see the anchor points that make up the new frames, which you can now click and drag to modify if you wish. Though keep in mind, once type is set to outlines, it can no longer be edited. So that's all the key insights you need to know about formatting type in InDesign. Now we are all clued up on how to use type, it's now time to move on to the next step. When working with type in InDesign, one of the most crucial elements to consider is the font you choose for your text. So in the next video, we're going to explore fonts and see the features InDesign offers, allowing you to make the most of your type choices for powerful professional designs. See you in the next video.